whose impracticality has been known about for over a century. Now, I understand if you're skeptical, so let me give you my reasons for that. After all, there seems to be a lot of smart people saying, we can get totally off oil. Al Gore said in 2008 that we could do it by 2018, that we wouldn't need any fossil fuels at all. And people say we can definitely do it by 2050. Even some top economists say that kind of thing. Let's just get clear first of all what I mean by clean or green economy, because people use clean energy or green energy in lots of different ways. But the three big clean green technologies that are least controversial are solar, wind, and biofuels. You could also call it biomass. So solar in the sense of solar panels, or solar thermal, solar, it's also called solar thermal, but different sort of direct technologies that use direct sunlight. In a sense, all of our energy is solar, except for nuclear, because ultimately coming from the sun. Like the wind is ultimately based on the sun in large part. So that's a scientific technicality. But last night somebody called me and I said, just want to make clear. When I say solar, I just mean solar panels, solar photovoltaic, using direct sunlight to get energy. And then there's wind, wind turbines. And then there's biofuels, which is generating energy using animal or vegetable matter. So corn stalks, wood chips, manure piles, those kinds of things. So these are the candidates, and there are kind of two basic visions for what this green economy is going to look like. One is basically almost all power. Oh, I should say, nuclear power doesn't generate CO2, but it's generally not considered green by just about every major environmentalist group. So as a practical matter, it has been and will continue to be opposed for the foreseeable future. So Al Gore is against it. Barack Obama is like about 1/8% for one reactor in Atlanta. So as a practical thing, it's not really advocating. Greenpeace is against it. Sierra Club is against it. And the other thing is hydroelectric power, which is also like nuclear, a practical source of energy, but is also opposed by environmentalists. We've had many more dams shut down by environmentalists in the last 20 years than we have constructed. And James Cameron of Avatar fame, who's been talking about Earth Day all week, he was just down in Brazil trying to shut down the third biggest dam in the world. So this just gives you the idea of clean energy is really a pretty small space. So it's solar, wind, biofuels. So I want to explain to you why I'm characterizing it that way. So let's now, because you hear all these different theories about, well, this is good and this works and this doesn't, I think it's really helpful to look at just kind of the basic facts of the history, because these are not new technologies. So here's the basic rundown. For the last 30 years, at least solar, wind, and biofuels have been aggressively subsidized and mandated by not just the United States, but also all of the progressive, clean, green European countries whom we're always told to emulate, such as Denmark. And in that amount of time, and every year they kept claiming, solar dominance is around the corner, we're going to have the best technology, we're going to be able to beat everything else. Here is the score. Percentage of energy generated worldwide. 86% is fossil fuels, so coal, oil, natural gas. 6% is nuclear. 6% is hydro. We can do the math. How many are left over for the promising green technologies? 2%. So after 30 years, and this is supposed to replace not only those 3 gallons a day, this is supposed to replace all of the coal and natural gas for generating electricity. So if you wanted to put it in terms of the oil, get this. Okay. We consume about 3 gallons of oil every day. In addition to that, we consume the equivalent of another 3 gallons of oil in coal or natural gas-based electricity every day. So we're consuming the equivalent of 6 gallons of oil or fossil fuels. So the idea is this thing that in 30 years has failed to get beyond 2% is supposed to replace our enormous, massive world economy. It's supposed to replace the 86%. Now, it's one thing when these things are subsidized and they're kind of, you have to, each government, each state might have to use 10% solar or something. That's one thing. But when all the practical solutions are banned, and that's what they want to do. They want a carbon cap means a carbon ban of any carbon dioxide over the cap. And they want to ban all the practical sources of energy. Then we're talking about a serious, serious threat to human life, an unbelievable abdication of responsibility by anyone who fails to think about it. Now, just in case you might ask, well, maybe these guys know something that I'm not disclosing from you. Maybe this time, what's the opposite of the boy who cried wolf? I don't know if there's an opposite of the boy who cried wolf, but it's like the the green energy person who cried success, and it's never true. But maybe it's true this time, right? Well, okay, so I'll explain to you why it's not true and why it can't be true. And it's pretty simple, and there have been economists, or if anyone bothers to read them, have explained this for decades and decades and decades. And the fundamental issue is that solar, wind, and biofuels are not scalable sources of energy. In some contexts, they can produce a small percentage of the energy needed in an economy. And I'm totally fine with that. I have nothing against solar panels as such. If they could actually make my electricity cheaper without subsidies, I would buy them for sure. I have nothing against biofuels. I've even heard a couple of good biofuel ideas before. But they're not scalable, so whenever you hear an idea asked, you have to ask, if we're talking about replacing all of our oil and energy, we're talking about something that has to scale to that enormous, enormous size of the energy that we require in our daily lives. And these can't scale. And the reason in the case of biofuels is that they're very, very energy diffuse. The energy in the biofuels and the crops is so spread out that you need giant amounts of land. And you don't just need giant amounts of any land. You need a giant amount of a specific kind of land. And that's cropland. And cropland's kind of important because we need it to eat. So what happens is that you get very little fuel, but you start displacing a lot of cropland and you drive up food prices a lot. So just simply the math does not work for scaling biofuels. All it can do is drive up crop prices. And if any of you have ever heard of the supposed miracle in Brazil. Brazil is the best place for producing biofuels because it can produce sugarcane ethanol, which is the best type of ethanol for various reasons. And they've invested in it for decades. Guess what percentage of our daily oil, Brazil produces in biofuels? Anyone got a guess? Keep in mind, this has been, people like eminent US politicians have said that Brazil has already proven that biofuel can replace oil. So you'd think it would be a lot. Okay, no one's guessing. So it's 1.5%. And the way that they work it, by the way, there's all kinds of little gimmicks. But the way that they work it is they say Brazil pursued biofuels and Brazil is energy independent. But that's like saying Michael Jordan had a conversation with me once, and Michael Jordan is the best basketball player ever. One didn't follow from the other. So Brazil developed biofuels, but they also happen to have the most successful emerging oil company in the world right now called Petrobras, which is supplying all of their domestic fuel with oil. Same thing is true with Denmark, by the way. So biofuels biofuels, again, they can be a niche product. They can be a supplement, but not a replacement. So that's the important thing. It can be a supplement, not a guy I knew I met, he had an idea, he had a company that sold biofuels based on waste alcohol. Based on, so we drink some alcohol and there's waste product, and he would refine that into fuel, and he told me he could get $2